Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marguerite Anglin, and I'm the Public Art Director for the City of Philadelphia. Welcome to Public Art How to Start, our professional development series for emerging artists. And tonight we are excited to continue with our second workshop called The First Steps to a Winning Public Art Proposal. And I'm joined here by a great panel of fellow public art decision makers here in Philadelphia, as well as our guest artists, all who we will be introducing to you shortly. But first, I just want to let you know that this program is being brought to you by the City of Philadelphia's Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. We manage the city's Percent for Art program, and we also are the stewards of Philadelphia's collection of over 1,000 works of public art consisting of indoor and outdoor sculptures, murals, mosaics, ceiling and wall installations, sculptural seating, lighting installations, and more. And the artwork is located in every neighborhood of the city. This extraordinary collection reflects Philadelphia's rich history and the many vibrant communities and cultures that shape Philadelphia. OACCE developed the Public Art How to Start workshop series because we know it can be daunting for an artist to apply for a large-scale public art project in a major city like Philadelphia. So if you're a gallery or a studio artist who's interested in competing for public art opportunities but don't know what a public art project entails or involves, and you don't know how to start, we want these workshops to demystify the process and encourage more local and emerging artists like you to apply to compete for public art projects in Philadelphia. We also know that artists of color are underrepresented among those creating public art in Philadelphia. And so we want to increase the capacity of our local and also diverse artists applying for artwork in Philadelphia, as well as you can feel that you have the capacity, build that capacity to apply for artwork for public art projects in other cities as well. So in February of 2023, we conducted a survey to find out what topics you were most interested to learn about. And tonight's topic, which is about developing a winning public art proposal, was among the highest ranking topics. So we'll be also continuing with quarterly workshops over the rest of this year on different topics, such as how to create durable public art for outdoor spaces, how to develop a budget and a project schedule for a public art project, how to engage the community in your artwork, how to navigate artist contracts, and more. Each workshop will feature experts and a different guest artist who will share their insights and lessons learned in their public art journey. Rachel, we can go to the next slide. Actually, go to next slide. Awesome. Okay, so the goals for tonight. Tonight's workshop will focus on your first steps in applying for, as an artist, applying for a public art project. And so what we're going to be talking about is a kind of a typical two-part selection process for public art commissioning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Another goal for tonight is to help emerging or studio artists know how to position yourself and your initial application to get your foot in the door to public art opportunities through submitting your qualifications, your past artwork, your statement of interest, your response to application questions, because that's really the first step. We also want to provide you with tips and lessons learned for artists to strengthen your applications and get to the next stage in the process. And we also want to make sure we're leaving time to answer your questions about how to be successful in applying for public art projects. Okay, so just to set the framework for tonight's discussion, I mentioned before that public art opportunities in Philadelphia and many other cities follow a kind of a two-part selection process, consisting of part one, which you might have heard of, the RFQ or request for qualifications or submission of qualifications. And that's where artists would respond to a call for artists. You'd submit your initial application, which would request for your qualifications, past artwork, response to questions, maybe a statement of interest. And then a selection committee narrows down those applicants into a smaller group of semifinalists who move on to the next stage of the competition, which is part two. And then during part two, a smaller group submits design proposals. So that's those semifinalists who are selected by the committee will engage with the local community. You would create original design proposals, and then a finalist would be selected. And the artwork, typically in a municipality, there's some body, like we have in Philadelphia, the Art Commission, that ultimately would approve that project if it's placed on public property. So as mentioned tonight, I have this square around part one. We're gonna focus on part one of the process tonight, right? So that's gonna be the submission of qualifications. Again, that's your first opportunity as an artist to get your foot in the door. And there's really much more to discuss about developing a winning public art proposal than we can cover in one workshop. So this is just the beginning of the conversation. We're gonna be following up with future workshops that focus on the next phase and next stage in the competition, which is submitting your design proposals and all the things that you want to consider when actually developing your public art project. But we won't be focusing on that during this workshop. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. During the Q&A portion, we will invite you to ask questions by clicking the raise your hand feature. So you can should be at the bottom of your screen. So that you can be unmuted. And when you're called on, you'll be unmuted. You can ask your question. You can, at that time, if you'd like to show your video, you can do that. And also, if you don't want to ask your question out loud, you can also type your question in the chat, and we'll be keeping track of that. We do ask all questions to be brief and limited to the topic of this workshop, so that we can allow everyone who wants to ask a question to do that. Okay, we're almost getting there. We're almost there. Next slide, please. So we want to do a quick poll because there may be a range of experience in the audience tonight. We really get a sense of who's with us. We want you to ask yes or no, answer yes or no. A poll should pop up on your screen. Have you ever participated in a public art project before? You can click yes or no. And then, have you ever applied to a public art project before with the City of Philadelphia? And that's within the City of Philadelphia. You can click yes or no. And I believe there should be a submit button. If you can click that once you're done, and our responses will get tallied here real time. We got about a little under 70 participants here. So hoping that everyone will go ahead and interact with that poll really quickly. And Rachel Schwartzman, who's with OACCE, will read out the results for us.
Okay, so it looks like, can you hear me?
Yes.
It looks like 60% of our group tonight has participated in the creation of a public art project before, and 40% have not. And of the 60% who have, it looks like 42% have applied to a public art project within Philadelphia.
Awesome. Okay. Well, this is great. Thank you everybody for doing that poll. Whether you've applied for projects before or you're completely new to the process, we believe this workshop is going to be providing you with valuable tips to position your application for success. So thanks for doing that. Okay, so now we are going to get into our panel discussion tonight. I can see the next slide. Great. Okay, so I'm happy to introduce Tu Huynh, who will be our moderator for tonight. Tu is a program manager with the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, also known as OACCE. Tu has over 25 years of experience as an arts professional. His professional background includes working as an exhibiting and commercial artist, a muralist, and an assistant museum curator, among many other accomplishments. Since 2003, Tu has run the Art in City Hall program, organizing over 300 exhibitions in City Hall, and has participated in the selection process for countless exhibitions and art-related projects throughout his career. So I'm going to turn it over now to Tu, and I'm going to put on my panelist hat now, jump into the panel.
Thanks, Marguerite. Thanks for having me. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I look forward to facilitating this conversation. So let's get started. Let me first introduce tonight's panelists, which includes Marguerite Anglin, As the city's public art director, Marguerite oversees the city's Percent for Art program, which frequently announces public art competitions for city-funded capital construction projects throughout the city, recreation centers, libraries, parks, playgrounds, fire and police stations, and the Philadelphia airport. Marguerite also works to ensure that the commissioning of new public art in Philadelphia's collection reflects the city's values of inclusiveness and is a true reflection of the unique people and culture of its surroundings. We also have Kacie Liss, who is an architect, city planner, and artist by training, who works as part of the Art and Design Division of the Philadelphia City Planning Commission. She has been the program coordinator of the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, their Percent for Art program since 2020. Through PHDC's Percent for Art program, Kacie commissions public art for private developer projects and facilitates their open call processes. Welcome, Kacie. Our next panelist is Leah Douglas. Leah is the Director of Guest Experience for the Philadelphia International Airport, and she is responsible for developing programming to enhance the entire airport experience, including arts and entertainment, special events, airport furnishings and decor, among other things. Leah is a frequent member of the selection committee for Percent for Art projects at the airport, and also is the founder of the airport's art exhibition program. Leah brings a multi-dimensional perspective as an arts administrator, facilitator, curator, public art decision maker, and much, much more to this discussion. She's been around longer than I have. Thank you, Leah, for joining us. And finally, for the purpose of adding to tonight's discussion topic, as always, we value the insights and perspectives of artists. For this evening, Ben Volta is our featured artist. Ben has created intricate murals and sculptures in public spaces throughout the city of Philadelphia and beyond. He specializes in participatory public artworks, often collaborating with communities and public schools. Ben brings a background of over 20 years of hands-on experience as an artist, successfully applying for and winning public art commissions. Ben will be sharing some of his experiences, so welcome, Ben. So let's begin. The first question is for Marguerite, Leah, and Kacie. Each of you brings different perspectives and experiences about what artists need to know to get their foot through the door when applying for a public art project. So your question is, as decision makers who commission public art in Philadelphia, please briefly describe your programs and tell us what things you look for in an artist application for a public art project. So we'll start with Marguerite first.
Thanks, Tu.
Sure.
Great question. So just quickly about the program that I oversee. So I oversee the City of Philadelphia's Percent for Art program, which was created to provide beautiful, long-lasting artwork throughout the public spaces of Philadelphia. And the intent is for that artwork to reflect the city's diverse people, culture, and history. The program requires that 1% of the total cost for an eligible city-funded construction project. 1% of that project budget, that construction project budget, gets paid to an artist to create site-specific public work of art at that construction or renovation site. And so the selected artist is responsible for the design, fabrication, and installation of the artwork. And it could be, at any of the public sites that the city owns. So a recreation center, parks, playgrounds, libraries, the Philadelphia airport, fire and police stations, things of that nature. And I would say, what I look for, the city's Percent for Art program is very community focused. Projects have to be very site specific and unique to those the identities of those communities where the art is going to be installed. And so it's important for the artist to demonstrate an understanding and a connection to the project, demonstrate that they understand the goals of the project and what's important to the community, the meaning behind the project, and make a personal connection that would lead that demonstrates that your personal connection leads you to be able to create artwork that's going to resonate with this community. And I'll also say, just really quickly, I think that your artwork that you show, it should make people, it should be unique and evoke an emotional response, and to try to align your artwork to somehow link to the project that you're responding to, so it's relevant.
Great, thank you. So Leah, do you have something to add to that? Can you tell us about your programs as well?
And I remembered to get off mute. Yay. Off to a good start. Well, thank you for having me here. Happy to be representing the airport and the city as well. So when the airport commissions a permanent artwork, we work hand in hand with the Office of Arts and Culture because the airport is owned by the city of Philadelphia. So we work to develop the artist's call. We provide a description of the site. Usually at the airport, the site is predetermined by airport leadership in conjunction with the architect. We discuss materials for the call for entry because depending on the site, whether it's potentially a suspended artwork that we're looking for or something that goes on the wall or floor or wherever, the materials will change, but we very much try to be specific about, for example, if it goes on a wall, it has to be nearly indestructible due to the high traffic levels at the airport and traffic flow, because being at the airport, being in any public site, the artwork is exposed to a lot of potential wear and tear, and we try to think about maintenance as much as we possibly can. And it does also help, and then I also help to identify possible panelists that we want to have on the panel to review the artwork with us. I tend to look for a very eclectic panel, and the Office of Arts and Culture is always happy to listen to the individuals that we would like to work with. And in terms of what we look for in different applications, usually it's definitely the work samples at this point, past work of art. So you're sending in your slides, and the level of professionalism of those work samples, including like the craftsmanship. And I don't mean that in terms of craft, I just mean in terms of the quality of the work, that it has to be really exemplary. And public art experience for me is not a requirement. As a matter of fact, in the airport world, there are a lot of artists that we kind of call on the airport circuit, that you might see their art at, Denver or Dallas or anywhere. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for artists that in particular, oftentimes that are local or regional artists. And we also really try to make opportunities that can advance an artist's career. So we're really looking for that artwork that is unique, and it also works for what we're looking for in terms of themes. Slides that convey a consistent aesthetic for me is very important. Many artists work in various mediums and maybe subject matter even, but I think it's very important for artists to curate the slides that they are sending in, so that as jurors who might not be, familiar with your work, this is the first time that we might be seeing it, it really needs to be cohesive. So in a consistent style, so that we're not kind of guessing, well, where is this going? We have a clear view of that. So those are some of the things that I can contribute to these two questions.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you so much. And Kacie, you want to add to that? Do you want to describe your program and what you look for?
Sure. And good evening, everyone. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. So I am the program coordinator for PHDC's Percent for Art program, which is very similar to the city's program in that PHDC's program requires that 1% of construction costs for a project be devoted to commissioning original works of site-specific public art. But in the case of PHDC's program, rather than being on city-owned land, this is triggered in the case when a project is happening on land purchased from the redevelopment authority. So it's private development on public land. PHDC is the city's community development partner and oversees the program. And sometimes people think that sounds somewhat disjointed for an organization that's primarily involved in housing issues. to be managing a public art program. But the goal is really to bring art into Philadelphia's communities and to recognize the value of art as a community resource. I myself am part of the Art and Design Unit of the Philadelphia City Planning Commission, where I work with PHDC to offer staff support for the program. And I would say to continue the conversation about what we look for from an artist's qualifications, we're really interested in how artists are demonstrating potential for site-specific work, and if they have experience working on community-based projects. So this doesn't necessarily mean work that would be specific to or directly compatible with the current site, since that would come later when the proposals are generated, but it's more about curating the work you're showing so that it's giving us some clues as to what you could potentially do at the site.
Thank you. And while we're highlighting programs, I just want to mention that, of course, there are other agencies, cultural organizations, nonprofits, CDCs, that you've mentioned, that curate and commission public art. And their processes may vary, but this conversation is really to help you gain some insight into what overall they may be looking for when reviewing applications. So with that said, as Marguerite mentioned earlier, most of public art opportunities begin with a call for artists that announces the public art competition, and it's largely to cast a wide net for interested artists to apply. The call for artists is important because it gives artists specific information in order to apply to be considered for a project. So my next question is, what are the most important things that artists should pay attention to when reading a call for artists? So again, I'd like to ask Margaret.
Sure.
Answer that.
Yeah. So I would say, pay attention to the goals of the project. That's typically right up front. Why is that organization, that community, what are they trying to accomplish with this art project? What's the meaning behind it? Why is that project important to the city or to the selection committee that's commissioning the artwork? That's important because you want to show an understanding of this and make that personal connection to that in your application. Don't just focus on, well, this is a sculpture. What's being honored by that sculpture, or what is the purpose, the story that sculpture is supposed to be telling. I would also say pay attention to the selection criteria. That's typically a good call for artists should have some indication of what that selection criteria is. How are the artists planning to be evaluated, and make sure that your photos of your artwork reflect what's being looked for and demonstrates the capacity to do whatever is being evaluated. So and even if you have never done a large scale public art project before, if you see the selection criteria and how it's going to be evaluated, you can explain in your statement of interest, in your response to questions that should be probably likely in that application. You can explain how you bring other resources, people on your team to collectively provide whatever expertise or, to meet the evaluation criteria that's going to be in there. So yeah, there's other things, but I want to let other people answer.
So Leah, what do you think people should pay attention to in a call for
I'm
artists?
probably going to parrot a little bit of what Marguerite said, but one thing for me is read the call and reread the call. We want you to be able to present yourself in the best light and to follow the instructions. And to Marguerite's point, look what the selection criteria is. I think you should also, in our calls, there's always a project description where if it's written well, it outlines what the airport or the commissioning body is looking for, potentially in terms of something colorful, uplifting, more, it can be more detailed than that, of course, but just pay attention to that. And then again, particularly read over the section, the selection criteria for artwork. Usually for airport projects, we emphasize that selections are based on creativity, artistic merit, technical proficiency and relationship to the site. Oftentimes our commissions are, and I would have to say probably a lot, are site specific at this point. Ours are too. So I think that if you can make relationships to the site, that's the best thing that you should be able to do. Make sure that the application is submitted completely. Typically, there's like a really detailed checklist that you could literally follow and check off as the things as you go and submit. And then I also recommend that you not only read the call, but I think it's very important to do research about the site. And I think that's a little bit to Marguerite's point, like what is important to that community, what is important to, what will resonate with the airport, and, you know, read over the mission, just do research. I think research is very important. And I think that just gives you a leg up in terms of that. I think we like to see in general that people have committed time to this specific call and that they can make as many relationships to that call as possible. I think that goes a long way to getting you further along your way. So thank you too.
Thank you. Excellent. So Kacie, what do you think people should pay attention to in a call for artists?
So I would definitely completely agree with everything that has been said already. Making sure that you're reading and rereading the call just to make sure that you understand it and that you are thoughtfully tailoring your response to what's being asked for. We receive many responses from very talented artists who make clear from what they're submitting that they haven't read our documents at all, either by omitting required materials, sending materials that are not requested, or not acknowledging dates or processes that were outlined in the documents. So I would say that that's incredibly important. But I would also say that we're very committed to supporting broader participation in our opportunities. So we are happy to respond to questions that come up as you're considering an application, if there are really any aspect of it. So we would much rather spend time talking you through any questions than trying to interpret the intentions of your response materials. So
excellent. I see a question in the chat. We'll answer some of those questions near the end of this conversation, and we'll post website links for each of your the presenting organizations as well. I want to extend that question to Ben as an artist for your insights on the other side of the spectrum, right? So someone receiving this call for us, what do you normally look for?
Yeah, so I definitely look for looking at those goals, and I see if there's an overlap of interest. And I often feel like if with my interest, do they kind of resonate with those goals, and do I feel them growing and have the potential to grow in some way that maybe I can't see now. I don't know what it would look like, but I read the call and I'm saying, yes, I think something about this is really exciting. And then I ask myself, it could be exciting, but is it a good fit? So I think of what are the materials that I've been using that I'm really familiar with? This idea of having one foot in the ground. I know that if I know that I'm work with imagery in this specific way, and I could see that in this space doing something interesting. That could be with a fabricator that I know of or I've had a relationship with, could help me actually make that possible. But I just know that there's something about the materials that work. And then I think about the budget. Is the budget within reason? Do I think I can afford to do this? Whether it's, and that's on both sides, right? If it's not enough money with my ideas and my passion, or is it really out of reach? Is it in the millions and I haven't completed anything close to that? So I don't know if I'm going to be really considered. And then that idea of timeline, and the timeline is within the next year or whenever that's going to happen, but also the skills, if there's this gap between the skills that I need to learn to partner with a fabricator or learn to expand my practice even more. Do I have enough time to get that together as I'm looking at this proposal? And then as I'm thinking about those things, I think about how I can this idea of presenting the artwork that I find this interest, And then can I present my artwork in a way that leads the panel to say, they see that I'm interested, they see my artwork, the ones that I've chosen. There's a cover letter that kind of leads everyone to see that there's potential here, the same potential that I see. It's not what it looks like, it's not what the artwork's going to be, but it really helps lead people that might only give you 2 minutes or less on your request for, and what's that?
So you're talking about the letter of interest that
Yeah.
accompanies these calls for artists.
Yeah. So thinking about kind of creating a package to respond to that, as I'm thinking about like that's going in my mind. Can I do that as I'm responding? Those are going in my head as I'm looking at, you know, and looking at the call and seeing if it's a good fit for me.
Excellent. So this next question is also for you, Ben. So I'm going to keep you for a second longer. I know this has been discussed in past workshops, but it's worth revisiting time and time again. There are differences between an exhibiting gallery artist and a public artist. There are different considerations, different expectations, and adherence to the structural needs and rules of a specific site, cultural, perhaps historical considerations, and much, much more. And each site is different. So Ben, can you talk about your transition from being a fine gallery artist to a public artist, and what skill sets perhaps might be involved in that? What do you think are necessary for an artist for that transition?
So for me, it was never, I felt like the gallery artist was placed on you a little bit with school.
Yeah.
Like this is like the expectation. I always was drawn to artists like Sol LeWitt, you know, that would both be a gallery artist and did large public artwork, and like Dennis Oppenheim. And I remember in like the early 2000s. I really remember Jody Pinto. I went to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and I had Jody Pinto as a professor. And I remember her being the first teacher that really started to switch my mind to really think about site-specific work, you know, her Fingerspan Bridge and the Wissahickon. And I remember her even talking about like leaving art for a while and then coming back and bringing all of that social knowledge with her as she then engaged with others, and to kind of view art as this more expansive idea. For me personally, you know, I was in school. The reason I became an artist was I was failing 11th grade. I realized that art was the only place that I did pretty well. I went to my English teacher and said, if I read this book by Kafka, The Metamorphosis, and make an artwork from it, could I get some extra credit? Something happened within me that I read that book. The world opened up to me. And that was like, again, this idea of like having my foot in art, expanding into the unknown, and kind of finding my pathway forward. To making art with integrating art and academics. After school, I realized, oh, we have to survive as an artist. I started working with schools and kids. I connected with my mentor, who was Tim Rollins, who had really gave me the permission with his project, Tim Rollins and KOS in New York, in New York City. And I was really able to kind of just go full force into this idea that art can be this expansive process that can include others. We get to construct how we make art and how we want to make art, and then see how we share, and even construct how we share that with others. So that led me to look for different public art opportunities. I remember my first one was like a big billboard in DC. There was like a DC art walk that you could just submit online. And I was working with a middle school at the time, which I ended up working for 7 years with a math and science teacher at Grover Washington Middle School, Jerry Jackson. And that became like 2 days a week, just an incubator for integrating art and math and science. And I use that as a kind of a springboard to say, what opportunities are out there that we can share these projects we're doing in the classroom, and how can we connect with people outside of the school? We'll make artwork for the classroom, make it for the school, but then see how that can expand outward to others. So it was kind of this slow process, but it was also always in realm of kind of how can art be more than what I'm thinking about it right now.
Right, so because you are like the quintessential collaborative artist, and but I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier in the other question, and that's how you select projects, and that is different as a fine gallery artist than a public artist. Those considerations. So how do you determine, if you are a square peg and if you don't fit in a circle, how do you separate that and go for things that are a better fit for you as a public artist? Because a lot of student artists, they may be used to what they're doing, and they may try to fit what they're doing into an actual public call. And it speaks to what Kacie was talking about earlier on about things that are not relevant to the call, and you don't want to do that. So how do you determine as a public artist and a fine artist, because there's a blurred line there, which project to participate in?
I feel like it's like I was kind of getting it when I was trying to put together the idea of presenting the work in a way that people could understand it and accept it. I really feel that you're collaborating with this project as an artist. So it's not just like the panel that's there to decide if you're going to be invited and work on it. You're collaborating with them. So you're kind of presenting yourself as can we work together? Is there something that can grow that could be like bigger than just what I'm doing now? By partnering with this project, is there potential for something exciting to happen? So sometimes I read things and I realize, I don't think I could work. I don't think it makes sense when I see the site and what I do, it just makes no sense. And sometimes you read things and it really, you feel that sense of like, we could be friends. Something could happen here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So the next question, so we talked about the ways that artists can strengthen their applications and things they should do when applying. Let's take the opposite approach. So this question is for Marguerite, Leah, and Kacie. What are some things that artists should not do, definitely not do, when applying for a public art project that will cause them to be unsuccessful? So Marguerite, you want to start that off again?
Sure. I would say don't include poor quality photos of your artwork. Your artwork might be wonderful and beautiful, stirring, but if you don't have good lighting for your artwork, or it's just a poor quality photo, that's an immediate kind of, it's just, and Ben said this before, that really considers probably only 2 or 3 minutes that a reviewer or a selection panel is like passing through. There's so many, you're competing with so many people. That doesn't mean that you don't apply, but just put your best foot forward. And if you can, take really good photos of your artwork. I would also say, don't assume that you need to have all the skills on your own. We encourage artists to join forces to strengthen your application with various, areas of expertise. If you feel like, something that you're doing needs a fabricator or needs, maybe you can, as a graphic designer, you can create it, but you might need a woodworker or a metal worker or someone who does concrete, or it might need to be 3D printed or something like that. You can, have those expertise on your team and create something that's large scale, even if you haven't done it before. If you can show that you have that expertise of people who've done that before, who have demonstrated that they can actually do that work, and they're part of your team, don't assume that you have to be able to do everything on your own. And I would also say, lastly, don't neglect your website, your social media, things like that. Anything, if you're going to be where all your information lives out in the world, if you're going to be referencing that in your application, make sure that your quality images are there and that there's information about your artwork that really positions you, in a good light outside of your application as well.
Excellent. So Leah, what should artists and artist teams not do, not include in their application?
Sure. Again, to reiterate something Marguerite said, but it's extremely important, is the quality of your slides, because that does give us an inkling whether, if they're especially not good quality, that the artist might not really be ready to undertake a public art commission. And I'm sure there's opportunities out there. I don't know if you always have to hire a professional artist, photographer per se, but I think there are opportunities, like you're taking this opportunity this evening to listen and to learn and to participate. I'm sure there's other opportunities for you to see what that means in terms of quality slides, and so that you can get there and present your best self. Also, for our call for entries, we always have a statement of interest, and I think that's almost like the cover letter that Ben was referring to. As noted, yes, research about the site for the commissioned artwork. Do that research, but don't feel the pressure to fully detail or overly state your intentions for the commission. I think you can make nods and suggestions, but I think at this state, it's really mostly about the quality and creativity of your work samples. Thank you.
Excellent. Kacie, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. I would completely agree with the the overall quality of the images that you're presenting or any other application materials required. But more basically, I would just really make sure that you're following any application guidelines that are given, even if they may seem arbitrary, from file naming conventions, or just making sure the images are edited to show your work that's the most relevant. This attention to detail is really what will show us that you are invested in the opportunity, and that you have a level of professionalism that will make our partnership on the artwork successful.
Thank you. So this next question is for Ben, and it's an iteration of that question there. There's probably a lot of things that you now know that you didn't know when you first started out. So can you tell us what are some of the things that you might have learned earlier in your now from your earlier experiences as a public artist? Were there mistakes that you might have made early on that you would try to avoid? Or
I remember early on, I remember trying to really explain what I was doing. So I took way more interest in like that statement of interest. I made it way too important. So it took me a long time to realize that at a certain point I said, what is the minimal amount of text that I have to write to still feel the energy that I feel is present in the images that I shared? Because the images, I always felt I had much, that was where I could stand my ground. Like I was really good at presenting images, but this text was so hard. And I used to overkill with trying to explain, this is what I'm doing, or you should see this. And I realized to pull back and just describe, and then try to capture a little bit about my excitement for partnering, and allow others to kind of, how could I create space for people to imagine with me, to collaborate with me, to make this thing. I've lost so many. I've applied to so many and lost so many. And that's the other thing, I mean, it's not really this question, but I'm thinking of, I didn't apply to that many during COVID, and coming back in, I think 2021, I had 2 big proposals, and I completely forgot this in my own way, where I made this proposal that was like 60 pages long, like trying to outline everything. And it was like this back from COVID. I'm back and I'm applying, and I didn't get it. And I look back at that now, and I was like, I understand why. I was like overly eager and really trying to do too much. So I think really trying to see what is the core that you're sharing, and not try to go too far.
So don't overthink it. Don't overthink your letter of interest, your statement of interest. Try to simplify it, be more direct.
Yep.
Okay. So for the next portion of this discussion, we can't have a celebrated artist like Ben here without on our panel without asking him to talk about his work. So Ben, would you consider this to be a plug for your work? So can you share with us some of your favorite public art projects that you've done in the past or are working on, and talk about some specific things you did when you submitted your initial application that positioned you to win that commission?
Yeah. So I know so thinking back to my first Percent for Art project was with the airport, with Leah Douglas and the tectonic quilt. And this was actually a project that we had worked out at Grover Washington Junior Middle School with 5th to 8th grade students in social studies class and geography, where we had all the kids researching different countries and then kind of pulling imagery to fill these countries and creating these little reports. And that was a project we did in 2009, and there was this big globe hanging in the school. And when the call for the bathrooms came up, I said, we kind of looked at the different projects we had been creating, because we were about 6 years into this. And we said, why don't we apply with this? It seems like it would be really beautiful, and it would, we could revisit it with a new group of students. And it was this, we were able to really share, in that, I forget the initial request for qualifications, but I know I was able to share the excitement. Like, we have this thing we did, we want to share it with the rest of the city. That was like the core that I was able to share. And then when we went to submit pictures, I was like, and here's the kids working. We're going to do this some more. It's going to be different. It's rooted in what we've done, but it'll be something different. We're going to figure it out. So I was really so happy that was chosen. It was really the first it was my first project doing my first Percent for Art project and first project of public art. One of the things I should be talking about things I learned too. I learned like the thing I think about this today is like I learned about unions that they have, like, you know, to carry the glass into the airport was like $5,000 or something. Oh, you know, it was like ridiculous. So there's things I learned with this where it was like it was a print on Japanese paper, which on a small archival printer, like I had all that covered, but I never imagined that, you know, I'd hire some glass. The glass was only $1,500 or something, but to carry it in was, you know, 5,000. And those are just things that, you know, I learned along the way. The project in Alaska was a similar, I had that similar energy when I applied for this. It was for a youth study center. So it's a youth detention center in Anchorage. I saw that it was a suspended sculpture. I'd done suspended sculpture when I was in the academy. I hadn't done much since. But I thought, like, I think doing something with small pieces put together would work for this. So I was able to quickly, you know, express that I wanted to work with the students there to create imagery. I wanted to create this dome-like structure, but I really had no clue how to do it. So I applied with these like very rough drawings. They fell in love. The panel fell in love with the idea of working with the students. With this project, again, the challenge was that to work with kids in detention centers was kind of complicated. So most of the drawings and most of the work ended up being created with teams here in Philadelphia and then brought up. But it was an incredibly exciting project. The coordinates of play was very similar to Tectonic Quilt. I had worked on a project with math class and coordinate grids to create forms and shapes and kind of learn about coordinate grids and math. I had done that project with a group of students in Canada, and we had made this project for a library. So I had a whole project where we installed a wall in the library. And then when this call came, I said, I would love to expand this to be a more permanent Percent for Art project. So there's kind of like this theme I'm coming back at, you know, we would, before I'd apply to something, I'd have something really at its core, but I'd be excited to watch that grow in some exciting way. Our most recent project, which there's lots of images on my website for this, is the United by Emotions project in Tokyo. I see a question too. I can go back, like about the long spires. The long spires are plastic, so it's like just acrylic suspended. So there's a mirror acrylic, a clear acrylic, and then drawings, overlapping printed drawings on the plastic for Celestial Cascade. I usually do this showing like the process, like with all the kids, you know, and working. So I'm learning how to just tell the story. So thanks everybody. But United by Emotions began with really a visit to some artists that have a wonderful mural project in Saiki, Japan, which is in the South. Came and visited my studio in 2015, knowing that Philadelphia has a lot of murals, and somehow through mutual friends we met and got to spend the afternoon together. And then through Facebook and Instagram, we just kind of cheered each other on with projects for a few years and reached out to each other a few times to say we would love to work together. And then this special opportunity came about through the US-Japan Friendship Commission for the 2020 Olympics, that they wanted to have artists featured in celebration of the Olympics and in collaboration with the Olympics. And at that point, since we had this history of 3 or 4 years of friendship where we had a strong connection, me and the Chara Rinpa project, which is primarily Cho Kawakawa, we were able to create a proposal that really captured that friendship and then shared the excitement that we wanted to see a project grow. So it was, again, the cover letter or the statement of interest was rooted in this thing that we had, this friendship that we had built over 4 or 5 years. And it was communicating that kind of, this has to happen. Don't you want to do it with us? This has to happen. Wouldn't you love to partner with us? So of course, when we got it, we were very excited. The idea for that was to partner with students here in Philadelphia. So we partnered with Beige Martin Elementary School, worked with elementary school students there. Then we partnered with students in Saiki to create drawings based upon, you know, expanded personal energy that would wrap around these rings and then be suspended. And then we partnered with Kids in Tokyo at the Panasonic Center to create an installation last summer because the Olympics kept getting postponed and they didn't have any more educational program. But the Panasonic Center was incredible, and they committed to the project, and we were able to do it once the borders opened.
Excellent. I just want to go back a little bit. When you're applying for a public art project as a collaborative artist, in the photograph section, when you submit photographs, do you show documented photography as part of your submission? Do some of these projects ask for that or allow for that, or is that something you normally do?
Whenever I'm able to, I do. So when there's only about 5 images, so it's just the work, then I'll often just include the final shots, made by a professional photographer, which I try to find the work that really will best match the project. When you're asked for 10 or 20 images, I will always submit probably 4 or 5 images that show a process board, or I'll show, we have a project in Reston where we had 250 kids, celebrating outside the artwork. And that just shows that there's this link between it is the artwork, but for me and my work, it really is this link between the community, the artwork, and then the space that we're transforming,
Yes, and the meaningfulness of your work a lot of it has to do with these collaborations. It's not just the visual that's being installed, but the experiences that you've had with these communities and with these schools as well. So in your application, you find that's a winning point that you want to show when you're able to. Is that what I'm getting here?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, excellent. At this time, let's pause for a moment, and I want to open the floor to questions from our audience to ask questions. Please use the raise your hand feature that Marguerite had mentioned earlier, located at the bottom menu of your Zoom window. When you're called on, you will be unmuted to ask your question. If you do not want to ask your question out loud, please type your question in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. Also, we have a lot of people in the audience, so to ensure as many questions as possible, we ask you to keep your questions specific to tonight's topic only. I'm going to ask Rachel Schwartzman again from our office, from OACCE, to help out with the Q&A. Rachel, can you call on people in order to raise their hand?
Yeah, I see Christopher Hart Chambers. You can go ahead and you should be unmuted, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Great. What's your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see my face also?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I've actually had 2 I don't know if you'd call them commissions, because they purchased ready works that were already in existence. But I've noticed 2 things in the public calls. One is that for the most part, it seems to require a without being deprecating, a sort of an illustrative kind of thinking, like attending to a preordained, that's a bad word. There's a rubric that they're looking to fill. But more specifically, this is my question.
Okay.
Is if it's not that, what I just said, very many of them seem to require, 5 seems to be the average, previous experience working on this scale or working with the community. So here, let me get right to it now. Can I, for example, use my fabricator as an umbrella and say, well, the fabricator has done lots of large scale sculptures for all sorts of people, where that's the whole question. Can I work under the umbrella of the fabricator's experience?
Okay, so who would like to answer this question? Marguerite, you want to give it a shot?
Sure. Christopher, thank you for your question. I would say it depends on the work. If it's something, if it's something very specialized, where you would have a fabricator or a contractor, for example, you know, say I'm just making something up, right? So say you are a graphic designer or you're an illustrator or an artist, a painter, and you're going to create an image that then will get fabricated onto tiles, like art tiles or something like that. Or you're going to create something that's going to get made on glass. You're not a glass maker, you're not a tile maker, or you say you don't work in that actual medium that it's going to get installed on. You would definitely want to show that you have the ability to create the image, that you have, you've done original artwork that's relevant to the call. And then you can show, you know, examples of if you're bringing your fabricator on as part of your team. Yes, absolutely. Show examples of that finished product and how, you know, the craftsmanship of that and how the quality of that comes out. And you have that expertise to meet that if it's a tile project or, you know, some specific medium that the call is asking for, you'll have a fabricator to do that work for you. You would definitely want to include their expertise in your response. Does that answer your question?
Their expertise, or not even expertise, but their track record of having produced numerous things where I have not. Can I sort of use that as a stand-in for my lack of experience? Because many of these calls are saying they want to see, like I said, 5 previous commissions. Can I say, well, they've done 5 and here's my idea for it?
So you're asking about showing their work and not your own work. Does anybody want to respond to that? Anybody else?
Not exactly. I mean, it's my vision.
Is your vision, but it's their fabrication.
Right. And they have the experience that I need in order to get this commission.
Right.
You see what I mean?
So for this RFQ, for the request for qualifications, you're asking if you can showcase their images of their work?
No. The work would be mine, but they
yours.
have the qualifications to get the job because they're not, whoever the commissioning body is, are going to say, well, you haven't done something on this scale before. That's what we require. Well, these guys have. They're going to build it. It's my vision.
Right.
I would say, well, go
Anyone
ahead.
else,
If we'll have people, please have other people respond, please.
Okay.
Ben, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely done that in cover letters. So like the big project I lost in Florida was going to be all mosaics, and I've never done mosaics, but I had a company, you know, give me samples, and I researched installers and got initial quotes. And
you cited this company in your proposal.
Yes. So you cite the company and you kind of have, and if it was in person, I would have brought those samples. It was a Zoom presentation, but I would have brought those samples and said, there's people that know how to do this. And this is the imagery I'm thinking. And this is how I see it being installed, but I had never done it personally. I have one that I've won with New Jersey Transit that was, you know, etched in glass. So that was something that I've never done before, but I listed the company and the process and said, this is how I see this fitting into these bus shelters. So I think, again, if you can share if they can get them excited about your work and then just show them that you've thought about the fabricating process. I think it has, I've done it in the past and I think it can work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Ben. I think that the acknowledgement that you would work with professional fabricators, you know, yes, you are showing your work as the 5 slides, but to acknowledge that you would, you know, collaborate with professional fabricators is an indication to anyone that's reading that you're on it. You know, you're thinking in the correct direction.
Much obliged.
Thank you, Christopher, for that question. Let's go to the next audience member. Rachel? Who's next?
Yeah, we've got 3 hands up, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly, but we're going to hear from Juanda Miles, Eric Stein, and then Ifeanyi Owu. So let's start with Juanda Miles. You are unmuted.
Okay, I guess mine is probably on top of what the gentleman was before. I'm more a conceptual artist, so and I do the research. Sometimes I don't like certain art installations that go with certain things because I just don't think that they did enough research to it. But I'm not the artist. Not to say that I can't work in the medium, but I might not know a lot of artists that could do the concepts that I I want to do. And so I was wondering, it's like, do you help connect conceptual artists with the people that do it? Because I figured you would probably know the best ones out there. You know, there's so many things to do. And I have no problem with helping the artists, you know, in the medium. But
Juwanda, I think we're having, am I having the only person having a hard time hearing the question, or is it, can you guys hear what she's saying?
Yeah,
Can
it's
you
a
hear
little
me
bit of
now?
background noise, but I can hear.
There's a little background noise.
Oh,
Your end.
the reason why, because I said I was to and fro. And so I'm
Okay.
actually walking
Okay.
out trying to do this webinar right now.
Gotcha.
So I'm about to go into a building. But what I was saying was I am a conceptual artist. So I haven't really done many artist installations, but I do know like people in the art community, but I don't know a lot. So I was wondering if you guys, if I could submit things as a conceptual artist and you could help join me with the artist to help me materialize it.
Okay, it's similar to Christopher's question. Kacie, do you want to weigh in, or someone else?
So it sounds like you're looking for help with networking with other artists who might have more experience doing this type of work in order to pursue these types of opportunities. And
Right.
I would say that for our program, that's something that we've been thinking about, ways that we can encourage and directly facilitate mentorship between artists, but we haven't, at least for PHDC's program, directly connected folks so far. But we would certainly encourage those types of partnerships, and we're looking for more ways to do that.
Okay, so who's our next audience questioner?
Eric Stein, you are unmuted.
Hi, Eric.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Regarding working with, a team, I have submitted public art applications to a number of locations, and some of the works I've used. I have an architect that I work with who helps me with CAD drawings and dramatizations that are short videos. And I was wondering, as well as fabricators. And my question is should I have, I've done complete estimates with the fabricators, so it's on their letterhead, and it has all the details of what the cost is for fabricating that piece. And should I include that in the application? That's one. And two, with the architect, I mentioned in the descriptions that I'm working with my architect and fabricators, of course. And should I mention the name of the architect with his permission, of course? Is that advantageous?
So who would like to take that question? We have a couple of architects, architects and people architecture backgrounds. Marguerite, would you like to help
Sure.
Eric out?
Yeah, Eric, that's a great question. The first part of your question, I would not put in any, so for this, as a reminder, we're talking about that first step, right? So this first part of the application process, which is your, past artwork, submitting what your team, your statement of interest, response to questions. So you don't want to get specific into here's cost, because you haven't been yet narrowed down yet to be selected to be that smaller group of semifinalists that is going to then provide a proposal. And in part of that proposal in part two with your artwork would include a budget for how to get that, for that work.
Yeah,
So
I understand that, but the particular application that I was referring to was there was no pre and selection committee. The municipality was asking for a specific design for that specific location in as complete a process as possible. And it was for a major city in the Midwest. I think I went really high up on the list. But that, there was no pre. There was just design a piece for this specific location. And I know there was a lot of extra expense in that.
Mhm.
And I've talked to friends of mine or other professional artists who have done other work, and Donald Lipsky. And Donald told me that he doesn't apply for, specific locations like that. And I may not again because of the involvement and cost involved. Because my architect does not work for free, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, that's different.
Eric, I would say just quickly, I would say yes, and this is not the topic of this session, but I want to answer your question really quickly. Yes, you should show who's on your team. If you have an architect as part of your team, you want to list them. And as part of your budget, yes, you should break down what all of the costs are, any fabricators, designers, other people who make up your team, because that will show that you've included and thought of everything, and your budget is comprehensive.
And
Okay.
Eric,
Well, I
Eric,
did mention that I was working with an architect, but I didn't specifically name him.
and
Yes.
I also think to Ben's point, like read the application, because I think in this instance whereby they did not have that first round, I think that you were required to really put up a lot of expenses that you shouldn't have had to do at that stage. So, that's my advice. And I think you alluded to it earlier. You might not apply to things like that again, because
Yeah,
it is,
I think that's the I think that's the solution.
yeah.
That's a
I
good
guess
point,
that was
yeah.
the municipality's error, maybe.
Right. Well, thank you, Eric, for that great question. So who's our next participant?
Okay, Ife, you are unmuted.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see Ben. How you doing, Ben?
Hey, Faye. Good to hear you.
Yeah, my question, I have two questions. One question is, can an artist be both a gallery artist and a public artist? And are they frowned upon to one just pick one or the other? Secondly, the second question is, what are some good points on how to build your relationship with a fabricator? Do you first conceptualize the idea and then work with the fabricator, or work with the fabricator to help you on your conception?
Ben, do you want to take this one?
Oh my. I think I addressed a little bit about the gallery artist and the public artists. It's like I've always felt like there's so many artists to look at that show that you can blur the boundaries and you can exist in both worlds. And what's so exciting about art is we get to decide, we get to build our career and the way we want to be artists. So I love your work, and I think you should keep sharing that in public ways and in gallery ways. So as far as fabricators, I feel like it's relationships, and it's often who's for a while I was doing proposals with Ammuniel, and I never made a project with Ammuniel, but I went through this process, and it was, I'd share the budget and my ideas, and we would go back and forth, and it was a relationship with the design and sales manager there. And that I feel like I can still go back to them because I have that experience a little bit, but it really is just a matter of continuing. The more we reach out, and I'm glad the more you reach out to people and make those connections, the more tools you have when you look at those call for entries and say, okay, I had this experience of developing a proposal here in metal. Maybe a little bit of that experience can now go into the next one. So it's just continuing to imagine your work in different mediums, if that excites you, and only I think if that excites you, and then seeing who within the region who is able to respond to working with you, and who do you have like a good feeling that they're listening to and giving you the time that your work deserves.
Excellent. Leah, you are
Thank you.
the director of exhibitions at the airport, as well as the person who facilitates public art projects there as well. What's your perspective on this?
What was the question?
I think she, again, with the exhibiting artists.
The
and
fine artists and
artists.
yeah. Well, I wanted to say kind of in some closing remarks, but I'll say it now. You know, I think artists who have worked with the airport in terms of the exhibitions program, it does give so oftentimes the ability to work at a larger scale. So, you know, there's to me, there are like stepping stones, I think, as to you know, the different opportunities, be open to opportunities, be open to engaging, as Ben was saying, like start to make your own kind of community of people that you can respond to and work with and trust. You can push each other to move forward together. You know, I think just be open, and even a small project. Oftentimes artists that we have photographed their installation at the airport when we see them applying for a public art commission. So I think all these experiences add up. And to Ben's point earlier, you know, there is a progression, right? There is a progression to your career, and take advantage of getting to know people, forging relationships, attending forums like this, and you know, just researching and educating yourself along the way. It's all important.
Thank you, Leah, for also the opportunities that the work that you've done at the airport. And, you know, I had an opportunity to show some work there, and it was just a wonderful opportunity. And I wanted to just personally thank you again.
And you too. I'm very honored to be working in this region with so many talented artists. It's really humbling. So thank you. I love your work.
Excellent. Rachel, do we have another question?
I want to quickly say we have a bunch of.
Sorry. Go ahead, Marguerite.
Well, we have a bunch of Rachel's probably on it, but we have a bunch of people who have asked questions in the chat. So just in case we want to take a look at those.
Okay.
Yes, I did notice that. It seems like also some panelists have been answering questions in the chat, so I'm not quite sure which ones remain.
I think we should start with, I see there was a question from Lucille Coleman, and was asking Ben, do schools that you collab with get a cut of the 1%?
Oh my, so often the 1%, like I explained it, like with these budgets, so usually the schools, in what sense? So there will be like we were able to bring all the kids to the airport to have this experience, like when we celebrated that project, you know, the kids get prints. So there's always this like, it's a collaboration in a sense, and it kind of continued the project moving forward. It's been very rare that we get the 1% for projects, and usually most of the budgets go to the fabrication. So it brings enrichment and excitement to the work we're already doing when we're in a school, you know. And that's moved, for me, the work has moved more into, you know, fundraising with mural arts, or, you know, I'm doing a project in Buffalo with the Buffalo AKJ Museum. And it's like you partnering with partners who are excited to put projects in schools and transform the community. So it's not really, that's where I had to move away from the gallery artist and what really Tim Rollins had done, which was kind of make this more of a studio that sustains itself on art sales and things. And for me, that didn't, because I was working in the classrooms, I view the Percent for Art and the public art as being able to expand upon what we want to do. So.
Excellent. So while we're filtering through these questions, I just want to add another question for the panelists. What is the most important piece of advice you can give to an emerging artist, studio artist, who is thinking about applying for a public art project? Let's go with Marguerite. You want to start with that?
First, I want to say that's really hard to just pick one.
It's really hard.
But since I was given the questions in advance, I would say just apply. I would just apply. Even if, you know, get into the game. Probably the reasons why you haven't applied yet you could probably rectify those things, quicker than you realize. And, finding fabricators, getting photographs of your artwork. And especially if you are, a female, an artist of color, please get into the game. A lot of cities like Philadelphia are very much aware of the lack of diversity in the public art space and are trying to address that. There's a lot of untold stories in our communities that needs to be told through our public art. And it's really a great time to get into the public art space. I would say from the city standpoint, we would love to see more local artists just apply. We get a lot of in our Percent for Art calls where we have international artists and artists from outside of the state who are applying, and more than local artists. And it makes us, it makes you like a desired commodity. I'm like looking through, I'm like, who's from Philadelphia? So and again, that's why OACCE is doing programs and workshops like this, because we want to empower you to apply.
Anyone else? Leah, you want to?
Yeah, so in addition to what I was recently saying, and take advantage of all these different opportunities, because I think it is it's like a bridge, right? You start small and you gather information, relationships, and your knowledge base expands. But also, I think if possible, maybe get some experience. If you could apprentice with an artist who is has a commission. I think that's because, even to Ben's point, working with unions and I think that would be a very eye-opening experience. And I would recommend if you could get your foot in the door and just befriend someone that might be having, Ben, you need friends, right? But you know what I mean? It's I think it's just a really helpful experience rather than kind of it going in cold completely. But I have had great experience with the Office of Arts and Culture, and they're very committed to working with new artists and making the process as easy as possible. We're in a project right now doing that. And I don't know, I can't speak to other, governing bodies in terms of public art, but for sure, Philly's Office of Arts and Culture, to Marguerite's point about, wanting to get new people in and involved, they're very accommodating, and I think try to take a lot of the stress away if possible for the artists.
Great, thank you. Kacie, what piece of advice would you give to an emerging studio artist?
I would say to just be sure to ask questions. All of these programs have staff, and we're happy to offer whatever guidance you need to support you in making the best possible response, because that will lead to the best possible proposals and the best possible artworks. And we very much want to foster and grow Philadelphia's public art community. And as Marguerite spoke to really make sure that Philadelphians and people from more diverse backgrounds are represented in our collections.
Mm-hmm. So. Ben, would you like to, as an artist, would you like to advise other artists?
Yeah, I think that for me still, it's just and I think the advice I could give is just really trying to hone in on what you're bringing to the project and what you really feel what is your medium? How can you see, is there that energy and excitement when you read the call and listen to that? Does it feel like it can grow? And then apply to as many as you can. And whenever you feel that, apply, and know that I think someone told me years ago, you have to get rejected 50 times before you can complain at all. So it's this idea of just really knowing that it has nothing to do with you. It really has to do with your, that spark of excitement, and follow that, and then just do the work to apply and just forget about it. And then be excited when they get excited as well.
Excellent. So, Rachel, do you want to get back to the audience questions?
Yeah, we just have a few more minutes, and I see two questions that look like they'll be pretty quick. Larry Millard just asked, for clarification, when we say Philly artists, are we talking about the greater Philadelphia area, including the surrounding counties? Can somebody answer that question?
For the airport exhibitions and for our commissions, yes, definitely, it's the greater Philadelphia area.
So would that be the 5-county Delaware Valley area? Or is there a mileage limit?
For airport, we kind of think of what we call our catchment, like who would be customers of the airport. So it definitely certainly goes into, Delaware, Wilmington, southern New Jersey. So greater than the five or six, I don't know how many counties we have, but yes.
Okay. Kacie, would you like to give it a shot? Answer that question.
So I would say that PHDC's program doesn't necessarily weight applicants based on their locations, but we're, as representatives of the city, we're interested in encouraging artists who are based within the city itself. So, but a stronger arts community throughout the region is also an excellent outcome. So,
and Marguerite, to add something to that.
What was the question?
So affiliate artist, what does
Yes.
that mean?
So, I would break it down even more to that. I mean, honestly, for a lot of the Percent for Art calls, they are very community specific, right? So if we have a call that's for a recreation center in, West Philadelphia or South Philadelphia, we would love to have an artist from that neighborhood apply for that project. But if you are from, Philadelphia, that could be the city proper or even greater Philadelphia, all the different counties, definitely apply. And whoever you are, try to show us some connection to, the values that are expressed in that call for artists that the community has, or if you've worked with a community that is similar to the community that's in that call for artists, or if you have some, make some sort of personal connection, no matter where you're from. But yeah, I would say just kind of growing from the community itself, then outward is how we would look at that, if that makes sense.
Excellent. Next question, Rachel.
Yeah, we have a question from Elise, which is, in terms of diversity, what about folks with mobility disabilities?
Excellent question. Leah?
Yeah, most definitely. We would love to see your work.
Kacie? The question is about mobility.
I would certainly agree. We would like to see the work of as diverse a group of artists as possible. And we also hope to ensure that, the spaces that the artworks are located in are equally physically accessible to all.
Anyone else want to answer that? No, Margaret. And I've seen exhibitions at the airport that really speak to that as well, with artists with disabilities. And it's really, even here in City Hall, as being the person who runs art in City Hall, we really prioritize underserved communities. And that's part of the definition of diversity as well. Any more questions?
Yeah,
Rachel?
we have one more question, which is, what is the opinion on a white sculptor wanting to make a sculpture of a person of color to honor them? Is this appropriate?
Yeah. So, Marguerite, I'd like to help answer that question.
I think that desire is certainly appropriate, and certainly it's a wonderful thing, because in order for us to make up for the underrepresentation of people of color in our artwork, so the actual statues themselves, in order to make up, we've got over 1,000 works of art in the city. And so in order to make up for that, we're going to need everybody involved in telling the stories of BIPOC individuals and historical, diverse people who have contributed to this nation. And so we know, for example, African American history is is American history. So yeah, that desire is wonderful. And, we, again, welcome everybody to apply for our open calls for artists. I would not say that's inappropriate at all.
And there was a
Thank you for your
example,
question.
there was an example of that most recently with the large commission for the new police building. Donald Lipsky was the artist, and he incorporated Lucretia Mott and
Francis Harper.
yeah, Francis Harper. Thank you. So there's that's just been done recently.
I see a couple other questions maybe further back, Rachel. But thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I just want to make sure some people who asked some questions earlier on get asked, because I know we're short on time. So there's someone, Adriana, that asked, hello, any advice on what to add and what not to add to the letter of interest or artist statement to make it appealing? I'll let somebody else answer that.
I think Ben sort of answered this earlier on. Do you want to
Okay.
take another shot at it?
If it's been answered, then,
It's been answered. I feel like
I think trying to make it, something shifted with me where I try to like thinking that they were reading 100 of these, 1,000 of these. How do you make it personal? How do you make it a little bit fun? And how do you share your world and your interests in a way that is just, it feels natural. That's been my challenge for me. And I know when I've done it, and when I look back on things where I force things a little bit too much, I can see that it's a little, I can see the disconnect. So just continuing to imagine that you're talking to people. The panel is people. They had a lunch. They have kids. And they're trying to decide what's the best fit, who's the best to work with, and really lead that. And
thank you, Ben. So we're really running short on time. I have one question here that I think that most folks would want to know. Can you tell us, the panelists, where artists can go to learn more about your public art opportunities within your respective programs? So Kacie, would you like to start first? Where can people go to learn about PHDC?
Sure. I would say the best place to learn about PHDC's opportunities are through our website and our mailing list. So phdcphila.org, and the Percent for Artwork is under the social impact section of that website. And we also endeavor to post the opportunities as broadly as possible on other arts opportunity sites, but really that mailing list would be the best place.
Great, thank you. Leah, would you like to add?
Yeah, I put it in the chat to someone else. For the rotating exhibitions, you're more than welcome to email art.airport@phl.org with your information. And then, of course, our permanent commissions are all through the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. So that would be checking out their website for any permanent commission opportunities.
Excellent. And Marguerite.
Yep. So Leah just said it, so you want to, for Percent for Art opportunities, you want to go to OACCE's website. It's creativephl.org. And you want to go to, sign up on our mailing list and check the box that you're interested in public art opportunities so that you can receive those emails and, hear, and also so that you can hear about future public art how to start workshops.
Excellent. And I know it's past 7 o'clock, just by a minute. Do we have one really last minute pressing question out there that needs to be answered? Rachel, you see something?
Well, I know there's one more slide, Marguerite, with next steps, but maybe we answered all of those.
So if that's the last question, then I'm going to turn it back to Marguerite. She has one final poll that she wants to introduce as well. So,
yeah, great. Thanks, Tu. Okay, so just really quickly before you leave, we have one last poll question. After today, would you apply to a future public art opportunity in the city of Philadelphia? And so that should pop up on your screen, and we'd love if you'd answer yes, no, or not sure yet, but I'd like to learn more. I haven't seen it pop up yet. Has it popped up yet?
I don't know why it is not allowing me to launch it.
Okay. If you want to throw it in the chat.
But here they come in the chat. Excellent.
Awesome. I'm seeing yes, a lot of yeses. It's great. Yeah, you know, for those who want to learn more, this is just the beginning. We are really looking forward to hosting more professional development workshops just to, like we're saying, demystify the public art process so that more artists are equipped to, you know, successfully apply for and, you know, create public art projects in Philadelphia. I do want to make an announcement that we have the next slide. Thanks, I'm seeing everybody's thank yous and their yeses. This is awesome. We do have an upcoming public art opportunity. Just wanted to share that in May 2020, in May, we will be the City of Philadelphia Percent for Art in connection with this, with our planning commission partners. Will be posting and distributing a call for artists for a broad Germantown Erie infrastructure project. That's going to include 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional sculptural components that will be described very detailed in the call, and artists or artist teams are also encouraged for that project. So please continue to check our website at creativephl.org for more specific information about the project. And also shortly after the call for artists is announced, an artist informational meeting will be held to walk interested artists through the application process.
Quick question, Marguerite. Someone just asked, is this a national call or is it a local call?
We distribute our calls locally and nationally, but again, this is another example, being a Philadelphia Percent for Art project, that we would love to get Philadelphia, you know, resident, whether you work or have gone to school in Philadelphia, and in particularly in that neighborhood would be great as well.
That's it. Okay, so thank you for joining us tonight. That concludes our program. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing your valuable insights, experience, and time. Please check out our website, creativephl.org, and sign up for our mailing list to receive info about public art opportunities and the next quarterly workshop in the Public Art Where to Start series. Thank you and good night, everyone.
And we have one slide with our websites on them as well.
There you go. That's it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.